Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Wednesday edition of the Carolinas Weather Group. We are very happy to have you here on the last Wednesday of October, October the 28th, just a little bit past 8 o'clock, and we're thrilled for you to join us tonight. We're going to be talking about nor'easters and the effect they have not only here on the southeast coast, but more of a major effect as we go up the eastern seaboard up into the northeast. So we have several guests on tonight to talk about that. We have Mr. Rob Eichler. You guys familiar with Rob, who was the meteorologist at Fox Charlotte. He has since moved up to Fox 25 in Boston. He is also the chairman of the AMS Broadcast Board, who Rob was the chairperson over the Raleigh meeting that we talked about just a couple of weeks ago. So we're happy to have Rob back on. And the last time we was going to have him on, he was feeling a little bit under the weather. So we're glad to see that you're upright and doing well tonight, Rob.
Yes, thanks for having me, and thanks for giving me another chance to join you guys.
Yeah, no problem. We look forward to talking tonight a little bit about nor'easters and how they affect the Boston area. I know we have a lot of interest here in the Charlotte area to the northeast, so I know that our followers will enjoy that.
I will proudly represent the Northeast as best I can.
Also, we have on meteorologist Dave Warren from Fox 29 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Dave and Peter are pretty good buds, so Peter was on the computer on Twitter trying to get Dave on, and I think we've got it all set up. Dave, how are you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm trying to get this video to work, so I don't know if it's working too well, but if you can hear me, that's great. And Rob, thanks for approving my tapes for the CBM, Certified Broadcast Meteorologist, so I appreciate that very much.
And every now and then I let one slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. A broken clock is right twice a day, right?
Right.
But if my video doesn't work, then just look at Pete's T-shirt, and that should say everything.
Yeah, you're sounding good, and video's looking good as well. So, Dave, thank you for joining us tonight. We also have Shay Gibson. He's supposed to be coming on. Hopefully, I'm working a little bit behind the scenes with him. He is the meteorologist with WeatherFlow out of Charleston, South Carolina, and we wanted to get Shay's expertise on this as he specializes in wind forecasting. So wind is a big factor in nor'easter. So hopefully we can get everything hooked up with Shay so he can get on here shortly. But he also is the author of the Chucktown Wind Report there on Facebook and other social media outlets. So that's our lineup tonight of guests, and as always, a couple of housekeeping rules. This is a live broadcast, so feel free to send us some questions via Facebook or Twitter. We also have a question and answer tab that you can submit those. And if you're listening on a rebroadcast and you ever want to get in touch with us, ask your questions via our social media outlets, and we'll get it to our guests, or else you can ask them on their own, as they will share their Twitter accounts and Facebook and all that at the end of the show. You will be able to download this in your favorite app store, either it be the iTunes or Android, Google Play, and download the podcast. So I think we've got most of them caught up, Ricky. Yes?
Yep, sounds good.
Yes, they are good. All right, before that, I'm going to pass it around to the panelists. It's been a wet week here in the southeast. I know here in western North Carolina we picked up around 3 to 4 inches of rain. And I'm going to toss it over to Ricky, who is on the other side of the mountains. I don't know if he got as much rain as us, but I know they're dealing with some thunderstorms in the area just to the south of you guys.
Yeah, we had a few little thunderstorms, so just more like gusty showers moved through earlier. We did have a high wind warning in effect, though, last night. Some of our communities right in the mountains get what's called a mountain wave wind event, and so like Camp Creek, Mountain City, up towards Richlands, Lee and Wise counties, they'll have winds of 50, 60 miles per hour, and here in Bristol, I didn't even know it was windy outside, because it wasn't. We had, I think, a maximum gust of 12 at the airport or something like that. So it's funny to see the local effects. But yeah, it's been a pretty kind of rainy couple of days here in the Tri-Cities. We're hopeful we get back into the sunshine just in time for Halloween activities on Saturday night. Looking forward to that. We had a big snow event, 3 years ago now with Hurricane Sandy around this time frame. Actually had a blizzard warning that was issued for Lee and the city of Norton 2012, so thankfully nothing like that tonight here. How about we give it to Kit, who is down in Charlotte at your show.
All right, thanks, Ricky. Most of the stuff going on today down here was just, really yesterday was the big cold air damming event we had a lot of. I was watching the Charlotte, the weather site on Charlotte's weather.uncc.edu, and as the pressure was going up, like the temperature was dropping the entire day. So that was cool watching the cold air damming event come into play. But today we had a little bit of sun pop out right before we had a line of just light to moderate showers come through. It was looking like Matthews got a pretty heavy thunderstorm, or not even a thunderstorm, just a heavy rain shower that came through there. Mint Hill looks like it's about to get some, but that's about it. Like Gaston County had a light rain line that came through, but it's pretty boring overall. I guess I'll throw it on back to Scotty now.
Yep, Joey, anything to add before we go into tonight's discussion?
It rained.
Good, you need it.
That's it, yeah. All right, guys, well, it's been a wet weekend. Hopefully we can dry out before it looks like some more rain moving into the area towards the end of the week. So we will transition into our topic tonight, talking about nor'easters. And so I'm going to hand it over to Pete. He is going to kind of guide the discussion tonight as we dive into the topic.
Oh my God, that mute button every time. God. All right. So I guess since the topic is on nor'easters, we might as well talk about, to begin with, how they usually form. So that's usually a big question everybody asks. So whoever wants to take that first, go right ahead.
All right, Rob seems ambitious. Go for it, Rob.
I was gonna say I had an interesting case. You know, as you guys know, I'm the chairman of the board for the AMS. So we had an interesting case a couple months ago where we had someone in Florida, an applicant, who submitted what was otherwise an excellent tape for review, and the only thing that she or he did wrong was the applicant kept referring to the local weather pattern as a nor'easter, and this was down in Florida, and this led to a big debate among the panelists, among the reviewers on the panel, because my contention has always been that, yeah, nor'easters may form in Florida, but eventually work their way up to the northeastern United States, and it's primarily not really a nor'easter until it gets to the northeastern United States. But, yeah, obviously Florida can get some northeasterly winds, but this was a stationary front across the state of Florida, and a short wave moved across, and eventually the wave developed into an area of low pressure off the northeastern coast of Jacksonville, coast of Florida, and then worked its way up the U.S. East Coast, which to me is traditionally how a nor'easter forms. But what started the debate among the panel members was she accurate by calling it, or she or he, accurate by calling it a nor'easter before it had even really developed down in Florida? So I answer your question with a question, sorry.
Well, so you kind of commented a little bit on location, so I guess, is there a written definition, Dave, of a nor'easter?
All right, so I actually had this discussion. I worked in New York with Nicole Mitchell for a while, and we argued over a nor'easter. I think a nor'easter is just a storm that gives you a northeast wind. So she said it has to be a certain storm that goes a certain path that gives. I think it's just more of a northeast wind. If there's a stationary front with an area of low pressure along it, and it gives a certain area of the coast a northeast wind, I think that's a nor'easter. So I think that she would be correct. But people tend to think that nor'easters are storms that develop off the Carolinas, go up the coast, give certain areas a northeast wind. You want to say hi, Evan?
Bring your kid in.
All right.
There you go.
Evan, what's a nor'easter? All right. Sorry, I got 3 kids under 3, so I'm working around them to work with you guys. But I actually think that, because it was early in the season, it was kind of a stationary front along the Carolinas, and it gave the entire northeast coast a northeast wind. And then you get the problems with the coastal flooding and the problems that a typical nor'easter would give. So I really think the definition is any type of weather event that gives a northeast wind to a certain area of the coast, and that would be the main issue.
And that definition has been kind of debated over the years, obviously between you two, between other meteorologists, and between us on this panel, because nor'easters don't really seem to have a set season. You can have a little low pressure off the coastline in September. Do we call that a nor'easter technically, or do we call it, just a little coastal low? I've seen both in kind of the summer periods. Shady, you want to jump in and say something about that?
No, I totally agree with you. We see them sometimes even in the summer. It just depends really on how much cold air is being pulled into the center of low pressure, because that's really what they're all about, is cool air pulling aloft. So if you have that factor in play with, especially with the Appalachian Mountains, that has a lot to do, our topography has a lot to do with the sliding down slope to the ocean and grabbing that cool air that's dammed up in the mountains, along with cooler air from Canada dropping down as we get into the cooler months. So absolutely, yes, you can have nor'easters almost any time of the year. They tend to go a little bit more tropical in the summertime here with the Gulf Stream, but yes, absolutely.
All right, I got actually for you two definitions. The AMS official definition is any northeasterly wind, typically a strong wind or gale. It does not specify that it has to be from an area of low pressure. It does not specify what area, geographical area, that it has to impact. But the official definition from the NOAA weather glossary does specify that it has to be a strong low pressure system that affects the Mid-Atlantic and New England states. So there you go. Even among two different weather organizations, there's disagreement about what technically is a nor'easter.
Right, and that's correct. You can have high pressure to the north driving a wedge down behind a frontal boundary for a northeast event anywhere in the Mid-Atlantic and southeast, all the way down to Florida. We saw that last week.
Right.
But does that classify that as a real nor'easter? So there's a little bit of a debate there, because there's a definite setup for two different types of nor'east events.
Let's talk a little bit about the influx that the Gulf Stream has on the whole formation of nor'easters, and how crucial kind of the placement of that warm water right off the coast is to the formation of the lows. Dave, we'll give that one to you.
Oh.
Throwing you on the spot.
All right. There we go. You got me?
We
Good.
got you.
All right. So yeah, typically you see there's these two types of storms that we often see here in the Northeast. It's the ones that develop in the Gulf and work their way up the coast, or the others that come out of Canada, and as soon as they hit that warmer water, they develop or redevelop off the coast. Those are the toughest ones to predict because you really don't know where they will redevelop and where they'll develop off the coast. I believe they're, what is it, Miller A and Miller B? I think those are the two words, or the two terms. So yeah, the ones that develop in the Gulf are the easiest ones to follow. The ones that come out of Canada and redevelop off the coast, they're the toughest ones, because a difference of 50 miles could be a difference of 12 inches of snow. And when you're on TV and trying to make your call, and the second part of the storm hasn't redeveloped yet, that's kind of a challenge, because you're within 48 hours. You want to make your call. You want to try to talk about, it's too late to say, well, here's what will happen if this happens, and here's what will happen if this happens. So they're the tricky ones to forecast, but they're also the most challenging. So I mean, I don't really analyze the water temperature when I'm looking at trying to make a snowfall forecast, 48 hours out. But I don't know. Maybe I should. I don't know. Should that be something I look at?
I've just heard, over the years that the location of that is more, not location, but just the existence of the Gulf Stream off our coast can sometimes be really critical in determining the strength of these type of systems.
I'll add a little bit about that. The Gulf Stream, it stays relatively warm year-round. We know that. We know it's a thermohaline surface current, and it meets the Labrador current up in the northeast region. So when you have these relatively warm waters, which are sometimes 20 and 30 degrees warmer than the coastal shelf waters, you get a mesolow or some sort of low pressure that is just making it out to the coastline and gathering a little bit of warmth on the eastern edge as that cold air spills down around the top and backside of it. So that's where you get this mixing effect of cold fronts overtaking the warm fronts. We know that as occluding lows, and that pretty much follows the jet stream. I'm sorry, jet stream. What am I saying? Gulf Stream, straight to the north, and that current has a lot to do with the occlusion of that low pressure going up the coastline.
Let's.
Scott, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was going to talk about. Dave brought it up, and over here on our chat, we were talking a little bit about it. We were talking about a Miller A and a Miller B system. Kind of talk to us, maybe in layman's terms, Rob. I'll start with you about what the difference is between those systems for our followers, because us in the weather world, we kind of know what to expect with those ideas. But if you were to be on TV in the next few weeks with a nor'easter coming in, and you said a Miller A, Miller B. Talk to us a little bit about the differences in that, and it's actually open to all of our panelists and guests as well.
Yeah, I'll let someone else go ahead and answer that, because to be honest with you, I would never mention Miller A or Miller B on television, and I don't know. I know I always get them confused. I know one takes the northern track and one takes the southern track, but I always get confused which is the A and which is the B.
Shay, do you want to maybe start off with that? Because I know the ones off the southern coast are more effective to our area here in the southeast.
Yeah, not really much on naming Miller A's and Miller B's either. Really what you have is how far south these low pressures originate from. And you really got to take a look at what's going on in the upper atmosphere as to where these things are going to originate from and then head towards. A lot of those come along Rossby waves, which those are sharp dips in the jet stream, and that sort of is your precursor to what could be a possible nor'easter event setting up off the southeast coast. As far as Miller A and B, I don't really have much to say about that. I think if you follow the 300 millibar jet stream in the wintertime, you'll probably be able to find more nor'easters, the origination points of those, and where they're going to head.
All right, kid, we're coming to you because you're our current still in class. So if you don't get this right, I'm going to go to Terry's office when I'm in Charlotte again, and we're going to have a chat with him.
All right. Well, I've been frantically searching Dr. Easton's lecture slides because we just went over this just the other day. I was like, I know this, I know this, I know this. Meanwhile, everyone else is just like, I don't know. I'm like, hold on. So a Miller A usually forms off of the Gulf Coast, like near the Gulf of Mexico during the winter season specifically. And it's that southerly flow off the Gulf that pulls in this warm conveyor with all that moisture, and it moves up along the southeast and then off the east coast. But the type B is sort of a secondary low. It's almost a combination of the Texas low and the Hatteras low that are just general cyclone formation zones. And it's the type B that forms off of the Carolina coast area and usually happens during cold air damming events. So I wouldn't be surprised if all the rain that the Northeast has been seeing yesterday and today has been because of the cold air damming event that happened yesterday, and it almost resembles this Miller type B system. Another note he says on here is that this can often develop into one of those bombing out cyclones that just really intensify. It's probably not a good enough gradient right now, but that's where in that Hatteras low where the Gulf Stream starts to factor in and those sea surface temperatures. So there you go, Miller cyclones.
Well, the rain that we're getting here in the Northeast today originated as an area of low pressure that developed in the Gulf of Mexico a couple days ago, in part the remnants of Hurricane Patricia. So that would be more of a Miller A, although it's not the classic track because it didn't go up the coast; it came further inland.
And it's almost like Type A and Type B are more like Part A and Part B, because the Type A will come from the Gulf like Patricia did and then head off like over the southeast into the Atlantic. and then it turns into a type B as that average low, funneling all that stuff in.
Right. Just follow your blocking patterns there too. You have your high pressure ridge, the north firmly built in, and again follow the jet stream. Those two will usually tell you the steering pattern.
We're talking about bombing out. Kit said it, which brings me back to the past couple of years. This has been one of the top weather words, especially in the wintertime, is bombo. What is it, Peter?
Bombo
I know what you're.
Genesis?
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to take your question away because that was what I was wanting to refer to. But,
It sounds like a new game system or something.
but we see a lot of people talking about bombogenesis. Can you guys tell us or tell the public exactly what that means and how that affects the people who are being affected by the nor'easters?
It's like a sou'wester, right?
Wrong coast.
I wasn't going to be able to get through the show without mentioning it once.
Basically, I think it's 24 millibars in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Pressure drop. So
Yeah.
that's what I do, and I'll throw that word out there sometimes. And you can see that anywhere. When I was working for the international weather there in New York, there was a bombogenesis event in Seattle. And the pressure dropped, and all of a sudden the wind kicked up. So they wanted me to talk about that, and I threw that word out there. But moreover, you see it here in the Northeast. So I just I'll look at the forecasted pressure. And I'll throw isobars on the air, and you can see them just growing out of the low as the pressure drops. So I like to do that. I don't throw isobars on there every day, but if a storm's going to bomb, I'll throw it on there, and you just see, as the pressure's dropping, you see those lines. I think it's every 4 millibars, every 6 millibars. I don't know. It's been forever since I've been in college and did instrumentals. I think it's every 4 millibars they draw them, or every 6 millibars, but you just see them growing out of the low, and I'll say, this is what's happening. That pressure is dropping, and this is what we call a bomb.
Talking about that a little bit, Rob, it's almost like the rapid intensification we sometimes see with tropical cyclones. You've got a massive amount of knowledge, being some guy who lived in Florida for several years.
Yeah.
It seems similar to that.
Yeah, and quite often it's warm water is the key factor. A lot of times when you see when a nor'easter bombs out, it's when you have an area of low pressure that goes over some of the warmest waters, either in the northern Gulf, kind of part of that loop current, or the Gulf Stream, at the exact same time that the jet stream, and you get you get in the right quadrant of the jet of that core, and that kind of lines up together. So it seems to me that the warm water is kind of key to both having something like a Patricia that grows 100 millibar or 100 miles per hour in 24 hours, or a bomb, a northeast that bombs out, nor'easter that bombs out and grows 24 millibars in 24 hours. It seems warm water is key to both. You have to have that really, really warm, moist air at the surface. At the same time, you have to have something carrying away that extra energy up top.
Yeah, and basically, Dave, you hit the nail on the head with 24 millibars in 24 hours drop. Rob, you hit it with the Gulf Stream moving in. And then I think, Shay, earlier you said something about having that jet in there is critical. Those are the three major points that, again, I'll credit to Dr. Easton. Those are the three main points that he's saying here. And also you need like a good low-level or warm air advection, like pulling in from the south to get more moisture pulled in from there. And like once it moves off the coast, like he's got a great diagram here where it's just off the coast of like New Jersey and the Delmarva area. Like it's got the upper level jet just to the northwest of it, and the really warm sea surface temperatures to the southwest, where it will just clockwise for y'all, it'll just wrap it right around into the northeast, just funneling in so much moisture.
Well, we can see now who paid more attention in the Hansonoptic class. Obviously, Kit did compared to me, because it's been about a year, and I don't remember a lot of that.
Hey,
that's all right.
Just one point. I'm sitting over here looking at the slides and listening to y'all looking through it.
Cheater.
So it's not that I've learned it. I'm reading off the slides.
Easy now.
No, I actually admit it. Tom Brady.
Easy.
Hey now. Hey now. Hey now.
All right.
These Northeast, when you talk about bombing out, sometimes they'll bomb out two. Sometimes I've seen them bomb out 3 times in their life cycle, from cyclogenesis all the way through, where they may bomb out off the Northeast coast, and then they head across the southern Nova Scotia out across the Norwegian Sea, maybe get one more blast over there, and sometimes they end up hitting Europe full on, and they bomb out again over there. We saw that quite a few times last year over in Portugal, in Zade, Portugal, where it draws 80, 90-foot waves, and winds are 50 to 70 miles an hour, hurricane force winds in a lot of cases over there, as our nor'easters make it across the Atlantic and bomb out over in Europe again. So there's a lot of energy going on there.
Yeah, and one thing that Japan is also a good area where they have those bombing out cyclones, and that's how they get a lot of their heavy snowfalls. So I think Joey had something that he wanted to say. If you want to go ahead and jump in, Joey.
Yeah, I was just gonna transition a little bit into the effects of nor'easters, and one of the effects of it doesn't always have to be a nor'easter, but we were speaking of bombogenesis, and it does fit in there. One of my favorite weather phenomenon of all, and everybody's going to compare me to Jim Cantori again, but I love thunder snow. And every time it happens, the first question, it always pops into my Facebook messages. I get a text, somebody, I didn't know it could thunder when it snows. So, Rob, why don't you explain how that occurs?
Basically, the exact same way it occurs with any normal thunderstorm. You have an incredible amount of energy in the atmosphere, and it doesn't really matter whether you start off really hot or you start off really cold. If you have enough of a difference between the buoyancy in the atmosphere at the surface and up higher up, if you have enough energy in the atmosphere to kind of lift the air parcels from the surface up to the upper levels of the atmosphere, again, it doesn't really matter whether you start off hot or you start off cold. If that energy is there, you can get lightning, and a lot of times it happens in some of these stronger thunderstorms. There's enough energy in the atmosphere that you can actually produce lightning. Now, in the summertime thunderstorms, that energy comes primarily from heating up the surface. In the wintertime snow events, it comes primarily more not initiated at the surface, but initiated in the upper levels of the atmosphere, where you get more sucking from the top rather than lifting from the bottom. But either way, as long as you get that air parcel up and you get enough of an updraft, you get lightning. It doesn't matter whether it's hot or cold.
When we transition to talking about impacts a little bit, Dave, let's bring you in. Let's talk a little bit about the tidal flooding impact and how the tide cycles seem to grow and grow and grow in nor'easters as compared to sometimes our tropical systems, which can just kind of be one surge and done.
Yeah, we actually had recently. It was a nor'easter event. It was more from a Rex block. It was right as Joaquin was just off the coast, but it was something completely separate. It was really tough working with the news managers on this one because we had a hurricane that could hit us, and then we had a prolonged northeast wind event. But yeah, the tidal events they're kind of boring to predict because you just kind of watch them. Each high tide gets higher and higher and higher because of that northeast wind. So that is something that can happen 2 days in advance of a nor'easter coming up, because if you get that northeast wind, that persistent northeast wind, tidal flooding is big, and there's some areas that are prone to it, and they just they get it day after day, each high tide. So you're just it's that, and river flooding is it's very damaging. It's awful to see, but it's also one of the most boring things for somebody on TV, because it's just like, all right, here's the rain, and 2 days from now it's going to flood. Or, all right, the next high tide is at 8:59 p.m. So there you go. So, but the tidal flooding, yeah, that you can kind of see it happening. Trying to predict if the next one will be as bad as the previous one, is a little difficult, but they do a pretty good job at the Weather Service with the flood page now. I was all over that one the last I guess it's the last event. So yeah, I mean that's tidal flooding is just kind of it is what it is. It's just kind of it happens and you know when it's going to happen. So
To me, growing up on the coast of Virginia, we had tidal flooding all the time from nor'easters, and we've been socked in for 2 days with persistent tidal flooding. It always seemed to be probably the most clear-cut meteorological thing there is. You've got a wind, it's blowing water onto in, and it's going to come onto land because the tide's going up. But Shay, Dave kind of hit the nail on the head there when you talked about the persistent northeast wind, and talk a bit about the location of the low in relation to the strength of the wind that kind of play into the factors of how much tidal flooding you see.
Okay. Yeah, tidal flexing. It depends on where you are, what your tidal surge is. We have 6 feet here in Charleston, and it gets progressively higher when you get down into Jekyll Island. You're talking 9 to 10 feet. So when you have persistent northeast winds, it's just a building block for flooding over time. So the persistence and longevity of the system, sheerly, those two things right there alone, persistence and longevity, from that angle of swell from deeper waters to northeast, it's a different period, a different timing of the swell too. It's just a very persistent thing to go down the coastline. It's a natural flow for the coastline, but it is a flooding flow as well. So when we talk about where the low pressure is and driving force winds, we find that the closer the low pressure to the coastline, depending on where its associated high pressure is inland, it's all relative to the gradient that's built in along the coast. So the further away the low, the more interaction with the high pressure closer over the coastline. That's where your gradient's going to be the strongest. So we could see offshore buoys reading 25 to 30 knots, but on shore we're still only getting 15 at the most. Where the stronger gradient is where your driving force is going to be coming from. So if you have a strong gradient all the way from the Gulf Stream, for instance, that's where a gradient usually always exists in these northeast events. Pushing all the way across the shelf waters into the coast, that's where you get the persistent high tides. We just saw that here in Charleston the last couple of days compared with the king tide. And we went way above our table. So National Weather Service is doing a great job. They have a product, the Extratropical Storm Surge product that they've been working on. I've been watching, and I think they're working off of the NOAA Slosh product as well. And it really is starting to define the anomalies and tidal surges compared to what the NOAA tide tables are currently. So we're really watching that. It's an experimental product right now. We're excited to see possible tide forecasting for wind events down the road, and hopefully our coastal mesonet will be able to help with that greatly by providing that information for along our coastline so what to expect.
That extratropical surge thing can be really helpful in nor'easters. From my understanding and talking to a few of the meteorologists, that's based purely off the GFS forecast of where the low pressure position is and everything else. So they kind of take the GFS model and throw it into that, and it kind of puts together the surge prediction. So each model is run differently, of course. We have 2 in Eastern Virginia that are run, so sometimes we get different numbers off each of them. But it's interesting, and probably, in my mind, maybe Shay, if you want to comment on this, feel free, probably one of the most critical types of forecasting over the next couple of years that may come into play with, sea levels rising and other types of factors going into all this tidal flooding. I think you're muted there.
Whoops. Sorry, Mike. Can you hear me now?
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, NOAA they're developing their SLR product for viewing their tidal increases, and it's on the rise. So the data is there, the proof is there that sea levels are, in fact, on the rise, at least in the southeast coast, and upwards around Outer Banks and up into parts of the northeast. So when you're absolutely right when you talk about how important it's going to be for these events down the road, it would be nice to see some of these more models competing against the tide changes and the anomalies that they create. I mean, if we're going 2 feet above what was forecast for the tide, and the peak is 45 minutes later, then we've got to rethink what we're doing on our tidal surges.
Very good points. Scotty, I'll hand this to you because it seems like we've got several different ways we wanted to twist this discussion. I'm not really sure which way y'all wanted to take it, so I'll give it to you, buddy.
Yeah, well, I know that there's been a few viewer questions. We'll get to those in just a second, but let's kind of, in the impact-based, not only do we get tidal surge and wind, but nor'easters can produce a lot of snow or rain up in the Northeast. Can you guys talk a little bit about that and how difficult it is, as we saw last year, the snow, rain, the heavy snow, light snow line, all of that goes into nor'easters in forecast, and talk to us a little bit about those difficulties of how much snow can span in just a small amount of space. 3 or 4 miles can give you a foot of snow to 2 feet of snow. So talk a little bit about that, how nor'easters with the snowfall and the rainfall impacts.
Well, I was reading up on some of the historic nor'easters to impact New England in preparation to talk to you guys. And what I thought was one of the more fascinating ones is the nor'easter of December 1992, which is commonly referred to as the downsloping nor'easter, because it was just a perfect east-northeasterly wind that on one side of the mountains you got about 3 to 4 feet of snow, but you had Albany, and it was primarily the Berkshires, which is southern Vermont and western Mass. You got 3 to 4 feet of snow, but it was such a perfect east-northeasterly wind. It hit, exactly perpendicular to the mountain range, the ridgeline, that on the other side you got more of a downsloping wind, and it was totally dry. And you had Albany, which is just over the ridgeline there, half an inch. So one side 3 to 4 feet of snow, the other side half an inch. So I mean, try forecasting stuff like that. And again, it's all about getting the wind direction within 10 degrees, getting exactly right.
And Dave, I know that Rob's been in Boston for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
You've been in Philly a little bit longer, and you've went through a winter with nor'easters. How difficult is it for you guys to forecast up there the snow rain line or the heavy snow to light snow line?
It doesn't matter how long I've been here, much longer than him. It's still impossible. I guess the trick is looking at the wind direction, and certain wind directions, like you said, within 5 or 10 degrees, that will put a lot of snow in your western suburbs because of the upslope coming in, right hitting the Piedmont Plateau. The biggest challenge that I have is watching, and I saw this a few years ago. We had the record-breaking season. I can't remember the exact year. It was like we had 4 or 5 big storms and broke our seasonal record. There was one storm that was coming right up, and it was pretty much bombing. It was developing off of the Carolinas, coming right over, and it went right over New Jersey, right over Pete's house, pretty much. And so we had thunder snow, we had rain, rain along the coast, and then the biggest challenge is with these type of storms that are just right, you got rain, then you go to very heavy snow, then to lighter snow. So you're trying to predict right over your viewing area a little band of like where it could be very heavy wet snow of like 12 to 18 inches, and we even had thunder snow with that storm. And then it gets lighter and lighter. So the toughest ones that I have with each nor'easter is where I see this thing developing and trying to predict it, then you're going from rain to very heavy snow to lighter snow. And sometimes that's right along I-95. So you got 6-7 million people in your viewing area, and you're trying you got 5 minutes to talk about, you might be able to get an extra 30 seconds out of a producer. About we got rain, then all right, here's the 12 to 18 inch area, then here's the 5 to 7 inch area, and it's all happening within this 12 hour time period. So
I'm really impressed. Sorry, Dave.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to make some joke, but I'm really impressed you get 5 minutes to discuss all that. But that's pretty good.
Imagine Eastern Lake Erie. Last year with that kind of blew up and 5 feet in 1-2 days.
Rob, you're going to be the guy in the midst of it up in Boston a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how nor'easters have kind of played into the Armageddon that Boston seemed to see last year and all the snow that you got.
I guess you could qualify two of the bigger snowstorms, the one that happened in late January and then the one a couple weeks later in the early part of February. I guess you could classify those, from what I understand, as true nor'easters, but as we've already discovered just within this panel, there's already disagreement on what technically qualifies as a nor'easter, but two of those would be nor'easters, and it's kind of interesting if you look at Boston climatologically. They get more precipitation. The wettest month of the year is actually November, which for up and down the East Coast is fairly rare. November is generally a drier month in the southeastern United States. But November is kind of a prime month for nor'easters to form. It's November and March are the two wettest months of the year. Now, that doesn't include snow. January is still the snowiest month of the year climatologically. But wettest months total would be November and March. So obviously nor'easters have a pretty big impact on the total precipitation here. And again, up and down the East Coast, August is typically the wettest month of the year. Here it's November and March. But yeah, two of the bigger snowstorms, and then the one that still most of the records were broken last year in 2015, but some of the records that do still stand come from a nor'easter that dumped snow here in January of 1978. So a lot of times the biggest snowstorms are the nor'easters.
I was going to ask Shay, just for a quick second. Shay, nor'easters kind of develop right off your coastline, the South Carolina, North Carolina coastline. What are some of the difficulties for you guys in the Charleston area as these things are developing, forecasting-wise?
Difficulties is, where is the low going to begin? It's usually you have a stalled boundary or an undulating front that is little to no movement, and we start watching any lows that are tracking along the boundary. We keep a keen eye on, and I keep bringing it back to the jet stream for the southeast, because a lot of that energy, that cold air pulling down from the north, that's what really gets it going. So if you have just enough of a dip down, and you have a low pressure developing as it comes across from the Gulf of Mexico's moisture streaming up and across the boundary, you can get that upper air rotation going. And then the second thing you look for is it going to be coming downslope, or is it going to be sliding underneath the southern tip of the Appalachian Mountains and taking its time, which would be a longer rain event for us and maybe a weaker low overall, versus a downsloping low, which would gain a little bit more momentum as it slides into the ocean and then pulls up to the north. So the problem is, and the thing about cold core lows is that they tend to be a little bit more erratic in their movement as well. So you can't always trust what the models are predicting, and you have a little bit of difficulty there because they're not really associated with the westward bound winds that just would push them off to the east. They're following an upper air pattern, and that's the hardest to determine, is where that upper low is going to develop and where it's going to push overhead or off the coastline. Once it's off the coast, you can pretty much get some pretty good forecasting abilities for rains and winds, but it's all the prefrontal builds and everything that goes along ahead of it. So it's I would say that's the most difficult part, is where they originate in accordance to where they come off the coastline.
All right, everybody here has kind of touched a little bit on a few different storms. We had a viewer question on Twitter that I was actually going to ask the question anyway before I jumped in there, but Craig threw it in on Twitter. A little background first, and Dave will get this one with his area. My wife grew up in Darby, right outside of Philly, and they moved down to North Carolina in '93, right before the big superstorm of '93 that I'm sure all of us, if you're at least my age, you know all about the superstorm of '93. That was my big snowstorm when I was a kid. But yeah, they moved down North Carolina literally a month before that hit. And so they were kind of like, we thought we got away from it. But that was kind of my story. Craig asked the question, what is one of the biggest storms of your guys', we'll start with Dave, so you can go the longest. What's one of the biggest storms that you can remember in your area?
All right, first, Darby Delco, represent. I'm from Delaware County, so great question. There's two. The 93 storm was big because that actually was one that it was interesting. When I went to school, I graduated around 98, 96, 98 from Oklahoma, and that was the first storm where 3 days out they were predicting a blizzard in New England. So that 93 storm, that was a case study for my synoptic class, my senior year. That was the first big storm where they actually, my synoptic teacher held up the paper headline and said that, you know, this has never happened. 4 days out, 3 days out, they predict a blizzard in New England from what was going to happen. So that 93 storm, that was my first thunder snow storm. The 96 blizzard, that was another big one, because that was when I was in school and I came home on winter break, and you know, I had 30. That was a record breaker in Philly. So those two storms are kind of what pushed me on through my schooling there. The 93 kind of pushed me into the Oklahoma storm, and then that 96 storm got me, you know, just kind of said, all right, this is what I want to do. This is what I love.
Yeah, that was my first thunder snow event too that I can remember anyway. I don't know if it ever happened when I was younger. I just don't remember it, but I definitely remember that. I also remember I was 12 and walked outside the drifts that were above my waist. It was great. That was down here in North Carolina. I know it was even worse up there. But anyway, Rob, I know you haven't been in the Northeast for long, but are there any nor'easters that you can remember?
Well, I was going to say the 93. I mean, I was living in D.C. at the time. I wasn't working. I was in school, but yeah, that was the first same thing. First thunder snow that I remember. A classic, as we've learned from, what was it, Dr. Easton? Classic Miller A storm. Yeah, that to me is probably the most memorable nor'easter. Again, not professionally, but personally. Storm period, any kind. Hurricane Wilma would be probably the most memorable I've covered as a professional. But nor'easter wise, yeah, the 93. That was definitely the one that I remember the most.
Shay, do you have a memorable storm on your memory down there?
Yeah, a couple in the Southeast. We don't get quite snow events, but I remember an ice storm of, I think it was 1978, and it was about 6 years old. It was pretty big to me, because I think we got about 2.5 inches of ice, sleet, and freezing rain. So I remember hearing it on the roof and everyone talking about it. It was a big buzz in the neighborhood and how people were preparing, and it was like you're preparing for a hurricane. People were stocking things, and then the event came. You could hear the ice falling all night long. You come out the next morning, trees are just broken over and molded into shape by ice crystals. It looked like something out of a Disney film. It's pretty neat. I would say 1993 as well, though, with winds. We got some flurries here in Charleston, but mostly it was almost hurricane force winds, especially at the Battery downtown Charleston. That was pretty much a no-go zone. They closed the bridges down. Or at that time, it was only one bridge, or two bridges over one span of the Cooper River, and they closed that. They couldn't allow anybody to go over it. And even last year, November the 1st, we had a pretty significant event here with a low that went down slope into the coast, and we got a few flurries and some sleet here then too. So high winds around it.
All right, guys. So we are closing in on the 9 o'clock hour, and I have one question. I know that Joey does his final question, but I'm normally not the controversy one on the panel. I normally leave that to Joey, but I do want to ask this question to you guys, Rob and Dave. You guys are in the Northeast, major metropolitan area, and one of the companies in the Weather Enterprise has went on to naming winter storms. And so my question to you guys is, nor'easters are pretty dangerous. I mean, they can produce a lot of snow, wind, and stuff like that. Do you think with that company naming storms, does it piques people their attention more to these storms? Do they kind of pay attention more? Or do you think the naming is kind of just something to put a feather in their cap. And I'm not trying to mention names or get controversy here, but
as if we don't know.
I wonder, because the claim is if a storm has a name, it has more attention brought to it, this, that, and the other. But I want to get your opinion on that, because you actually live in that area. I don't live in the Northeast. I don't know what the impacts are or to the public up there. So I just kind of like to address that a little bit and see if it holds any validity to what I've heard of the reasoning behind storm names, winter storm names.
Dave, you want to start, or? All right. I'm not a fan of it. I will agree that it works well on social media, because you can do a hashtag Juno, which was, I think, the January storm here in Boston last year, and that works well. It's much easier than saying, oh, that storm that's moving up the coast, blah blah blah. That's a much longer hashtag. So for social media, I will agree it works well, and in that sense, it's easier to talk about and more concise, and maybe does get the word out a little bit better. I will agree in that sense it works. But scientifically, to me, it just doesn't make sense, because whereas a hurricane, it does, because you have a very small, concise, this is the end, this is the beginning, whatever. When you have a nor'easter, there's usually several parts. You have a short wave that dives down, usually meets up with another trough somewhere in the southeast, off the coast or whatever. So you have several different pieces to it. So which is which? What do you call Juno? What's not Juno? Where does it begin? Where does it end? So not scientifically, I'm not a fan of it, but I will admit from a social standpoint, it does work. But I will tell you that no one I've met here so far in Boston refers to the snowstorms last year as Juno and whatever the other name that the Weather Service gave. So when they call them the January storm, the February storm, such and such.
I thought they just called it a frozen hell.
Yeah, they call it the winter from hell, basically. Yeah.
All right. Here's my chance to vent, and social media is great. If they name the storm, they hashtag it, especially if it's called Janus and Paul Goodloe stands in front of the J, so you get storm Janus. But my only frustration was watching the Weather Channel. The Weather Channel names the storms, and there was one storm hitting immediately, and there was another. It was back-to-back storms, and the point of naming the storms is, that's how you track them. That's why they name hurricanes, because you can have 4 hurricanes at once. So we had one storm hitting on a Saturday, and another one developing in Texas that it was back to back. It was a rare pattern. They didn't use their names. They said, this is the Saturday storm, this is the Monday storm. It was the perfect chance for them to use the names for what they were made for, tracking multiple storms at once. And they really dropped the ball there. So, as far as social media is huge now, especially in the news. So, yeah, name them. That way, hey, this is winter storm, whatever. Send all your pictures in, hashtag this, and we as people on air can see them easily. But the one chance that they had, they dropped the ball, because there was 2 storms coming in, one right after the other, and they didn't use their names, which is in my point is why you would name a storm.
Shay, do you have any comments on your end?
I was afraid you were going to ask. Yeah, I kind of side with Rob on this one. I side with the weather authorities as well. If they're not using named storms, they have their reasons for it. And I do agree with the other points about social media, how it can sort of relate to a name that people can associate with for public safety purposes. But I do think that can get a little bit blown out of proportion sometimes. So I have to play a little bit on the neutral on this one. I did hear something about Europeans possibly naming their storms as well. So I'm not sure if they've set a trend for other parts of the world. But if that does become a norm, I'll roll with it, and that's what we do.
Well, my 2 cents, if you want my 2 cents. I don't agree with the name, and I'm with Rob. Because one reason is each storm, there's no set characteristics. It's kind of like, well, this storm is this way, this storm's that way. There's no defined characteristics like there is for tropical storms and hurricanes. And that's my biggest thing. If there was a set standard, then okay, I can see a little bit of it, but I don't agree with the name, and I just think it's a big hype machine for those guys, and it gets people to view because Winter Storm Juno is going to affect 35 million people with, this, that, and the other. So it's a big hype machine, and it helps those guys out. I don't agree with the naming, but I was just wondering if it maybe helped the people in the Northeast track the storm better or refer to it, and obviously it didn't because Rob told he doesn't. Nobody in Boston remembers Juno or knows what Juno is. So
not that I've met, at least in the few weeks I've been in here. And yeah, on air we do not refer to it by the names that that other organization does. And again, to your point, and like I was saying, to have an area of low pressure that's off the coast of Maine and it's dragging a cold front that extends all the way down to Miami. Are the thunderstorms in Miami part of Juno that's up in Maine? I don't know. Whereas a hurricane, that's the beginning, that's the end.
Right.
Right. They could name the entire atmospheric river if they wanted to.
Right.
Well, as Scotty said, he's not the one that usually likes to stir up controversy, and I am. So I'll give you my take. As long as we had a set character or a set guidelines, a set standard for the storm, and everybody was on the same page, then we can name them. But until we have set guidelines, then I'm out. But anyway, I was going to go ahead and jump to my final question. Rob brought up something, and I know we're getting close to our 9 o'clock hour, so we'll make it quick, but I want to throw this around to our guest. Obviously, this year is a big El Nino year. What do you guys think about El Nino? Are we going to see more of these nor'easters this year? Are we going to see stronger nor'easters this year? And, what is that going to do to your overall forecast? Rob, since you brought it up, I'll let you go ahead and go first.
Yeah, well, I brought it up because it brought up a debate here among the weather department at the station that I work for, because the long-range forecast for the winter for this area does call for it to be warmer than average, which everyone's happy about, but it also calls for it to be wetter than average, and we were kind of having that little bit of a debate. From what I remember, the most similar El Nino to what we're expecting is the one of 97, 98. From what I remember, that did produce a number of significant nor'easters, but from what the chief meteorologist at my station was saying, that they tended to push further and further east. So although you got more nor'easters with a strong El Nino, they tend to get pushed further out in the Atlantic and don't necessarily impact New England as much. Not necessarily good news in the southeast or the mid-Atlantic, but could be up here.
One question I have, though, is they're pushed further off the East Coast. Is that an El Nino thing, or was that just happen to be more of a steering current for that winter of that year?
Well, again, that was part of the debate. His argument was that you get a stronger southern jet, so that they tend to get pushed further out, more so than an amplified jet, which would tend to hug the coast. But that was part of the debate, and if you kind of look at the Climate Prediction Center's forecast for the winter, they kind of have it much wetter than the southeast, and then that wetter than normal forecast, just barely skirting the New England coastline.
One other question I want to throw out there, and I haven't done a whole lot of research on this, but we know that the past few winters, and of course we don't always know ahead of time, but thinking is that we could have another winter where we have a lot of cross-polar flow from Siberia dumping more cold air into the East Coast. Have we ever had that happen with an El Nino? We have an El Nino winter and that cross-Siberian flow that's set up? I mean, is that going to make for a more snowy East Coast or Southeast in this case?
You're asking me?
Yeah. So we're having a discussion there. Go ahead.
That's a good question. I mean, that's honestly something that I'm worried about, because I thought, my initial thought when I moved up here was like, oh man, strong El Nino developing. We get enough cold air. This could be even worse than last winter. But yeah, the other meteorologists here don't seem all that worried about it. They seem like, oh no, those are all get pushed out into the Atlantic. So, but that was part of the debate.
Shay, you got something on that?
Yeah, I kind of, when I think about that, I look at what El Nino is doing in the Pacific right now and where your blob is going to be developing just south of Alaska. So when you have a buildup of warm water at the west coast, you tend to get a lot of lifting up into that area. And also, you start watching these Western Pacific storms like Bongfang last year, these super typhoons that get caught up in the North Pacific jet. And that's a surge of energy coupled with warmer air from the south heading up and over Alaska and dumping right down into the United States. And so some of these forecasts from NOAA have the deep south as being a target zone for colder and wetter climate. And it really is going to depend on where these continuous Rossby waves are going to be drilling down into the United States one after the other, and if they're going to remain more penetrated into the middle of the United States, or if they're going to penetrate further to the east or even off the coastline. If you have an omega block set up where you have two lows on either side of a high in the middle of the country, then you're going to have probably a little bit more energy diving down the east coast. So you got to watch these patterns as they unfold with El Nino. I tend to side with the East Coast being a little bit colder rather than the middle of the country, just because I think the Omega block might be a little bit more prevalent with an El Nino this year.
Dave, your thoughts on this winter?
The El Nino is it was. I know the one year that we had a big El Nino, 90. I got to look back, but it was the strongest strong El Nino, and it kind of gave us a warm and wet winter. And that was the year that my colleague at the time, Glenn Hurricane Schwartz, said, "Hey, we're gonna have a warm winter because of this El Nino thing," and it turned out to be true. So that kind of led him to do the winter forecast every year. But I think the El Nino is a big impact, but you can still get a big storm, you can still get a big nor'easter developing and get a lot of snow. And I think that with these storms recently, in the last few years, we seem to have more 12-inch plus storms than we've ever had before. If we look back in Philadelphia history, the amount of storms we've had that have given us 12 inches or more of snow, if there's been 8 of them, 5 of them have happened in the last 6 years. So I think that the warmer ocean maybe have something to do with that. So I think that El Nino could give us a warm and wet winter, but at the same time, you can still get one storm that can just give you 24 inches of snow. So these winter forecasts are rather difficult to do, even if you're saying that there's going to be an El Nino, so it could be warm and wet, and you want to predict less snow. You can still get one storm that nowadays can give you 20 plus inches of snow, whereas it's been so rare to happen recently, in past years.
Hey, quick question, since you both are in the Northeast. What is the typical range? And Rob, I know you're new, so you'll have to maybe dig us some data on it in the future. But what's the typical range for winter storm watches and warnings and blizzard warnings? Like when they say 6 to 10 inches, what's that range? How big is that range? Because I was reading a winter storm warning from one of our offices here today. It was Superstorm Sandy, granted, but it said snowfall totals from 6 to 25 inches. I'm like, that's a significant range, in terms of the amount of snow that's possible.
That seems extreme to me. Yeah, 6 to 25 inches.
Yeah.
I will say, and yeah, I've only been here a few weeks, so I don't have a whole lot of experience with the forecast office in terms of snowfall, but I will say they do put a wide range of temperatures in there. The other night they had anywhere, I think, upper 20s to low 40s, but because there is a significant difference from Boston, which is obviously right on the coastline, to even just 20 miles further inland. So they will do stuff like that. So it wouldn't surprise me that if they would put a wide range in their forecast just within a county. But yeah, I don't have enough experience to know for sure.
We'll revisit Rob.
Ask me again in 6 months.
He hasn't frozen to death yet, because
No.
Rob has moved, for folks who, Rob's been on our show a few times, and I'm friends with him, but Rob has moved from Florida to Charlotte, and now he's up in Boston. So he keeps going north and north, and eventually he's just going to start doing weather for Santa Claus, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right, Scotty, you want to wrap stuff up?
Yeah, we can do that. Guys, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I'm going to toss it over, if you don't mind, if you want to. You can talk about your Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts, how people can get in touch with you. I will start first with Dave.
Twitter, Dave Warren Fox 29. Dave Warren Fox 29 on Facebook. So yeah, just feel free to follow me, contact me, and I'm always happy to talk. And I'm an Eagle Scout, so I'm a Weather Merit Badge counselor. If you're in scouting, I can help you there too. So, and yeah, if you're ever in Old City, come on by, stop by. I work weekends, morning, night. I do the swing shift Saturday morning, Saturday night, and Sunday morning, and I'm there during the week too. So, yeah, I definitely stay in touch.
Dave, next time me and my wife make a trip up to her old homeland, we'll have to come by and visit you. But my one question though, are you an Eagles fan?
Yes. Even after I can pick up the accent. I believe my parents retired to Myrtle Beach, just north of Myrtle Beach, Sunset Beach, North Carolina. So I'm here because my parents live in North Carolina, not because of the recent game.
We should have made a bet with you ahead of time to make you wear some Panther gear or something on the show tonight. So we should have done. But anyway, all right, Rob, I'll let you go ahead and throw out your social media.
Facebook.com/Rob Eicher, ROBEICHER, and on Twitter @CBM, stands for Certified Broadcast Meteorologist, @CBMRob.
Yes, Rob's a good guy. And then Shay, who will be joining us December the 2nd to talk about the South Carolina flood. And I was talking to Shay earlier today, and I said, hey, why don't you jump on and talk to us a little bit about the aspects of the coastal Carolinas. So Shay, you didn't get to introduce yourself earlier, so kind of talk a little bit about what you do with WeatherFlow, and then talk about the Chucktown Weather Wind Report page that you operate, which is really interesting.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yeah, WeatherFlow, we run a private mesonet, coastal mesonet, with about 500 plus stations around coastal United States, anywhere continental United States, even into Puerto Rico and Hawaii and U.S. Virgin Islands. So we have a team of forecasters that we be forecasting up and down the East Coast, down the Southeast to Jekyll Island. We haven't moved into Florida and the Gulf Coast yet, but that's what our METS team does for wind specific. So we have sailors, kiteboarders, anyone that's wind driven gets a forecast from us, and we have a lot of different models and apps, products available with that as well. So we have Wind Alert, Kite Surf, Sail Flow, Fish Weather, and Windsurf. So we, for Charleston area, I'm Twitter @WeatherFlowChas, which is CHAS. For Charleston, WeatherFlowChas. And the Chucktown Wind Report is in Facebook, facebook.com/groups/Chucktown Wind Report. And it's a way I get back to the community and amass anybody that is interested in what the winds are going to be doing for the coastal and maritime environment, as our sensors are located strategically on the coastline to make the forecasting a little bit more exact out there. So I really try to get back to people in that way, so that they get the maximum time on the water that they want. Or if the fishermen are trying to hide from the winds, they'll know in advance what's coming down the pipeline. So I do a few YouTube videos with that, and I just really love giving back to the community there. Those are my that's pretty much my heart and soul of Charleston.
I'm telling you, if you have interest in Charleston or anywhere in that area, and you're out on the water, you need to follow Shay. He's a good follow and has some great information. So Shay, thank